It was a Tuesday. I remember that because she always made a show of hating Tuesdays, called them Monday's evil twin, like it was an original joke. That morning, I was supposed to be too weak to stand. My chemo had drained me, or at least that's what I told her. She kissed my forehead, told me to sleep in, and left for work wearing that gray dress I used to love, the one with the slit up the side that always made her look like she belonged in a courtroom drama. Except this time, she'd accidentally left behind a post-it note stuck to the back of her heel. I peeled it off after she left, thinking maybe it was a grocery reminder or some work memo, but all it said was, "Don't forget to delete pics, L." And just like that, the weak, dying man in the bed was gone, and something else took his place. I sat up slowly, savoring the clarity that came with fury stripped of theatrics. I didn't yell, didn't punch a wall. I'm not that type of man. Instead, I stood up, walked into the kitchen like it was just another morning, and began noticing things. Subtle things. Things someone who's supposedly sick isn't meant to notice. There were 2 dirty glasses in the sink, both with lipstick smudges, and she never double-dipped on glasses, said it was a pet peeve. The wine bottle was half empty, not just opened, and the cork had been carelessly stuffed back and upside down. There was an unfamiliar scent lingering in the air. Not her perfume, not mine, but something citrusy and cheap. The guest bathroom light was still on, and I hadn't used that room in weeks. And then I noticed the most telling detail. A single gray hair, too short to be hers, too stiff to be mine, lying on the pillow beside where I sleep. I sat on the couch, stared at nothing for about 10 minutes, and ran the math. I'd been playing the role of the ailing husband for 3 months now. I'd watched her transformation, how guilt made her attentive, how my fragility turned her soft. She brought me soup, massaged my hands, cried in the hallway when she thought I was asleep. The performance was Oscar-worthy. But now I knew the truth. The tears were for her, not me. She wasn't mourning my sickness. She was mourning the inconvenience it posed to her affair. That note, "Don't forget to delete pics," that was my first breadcrumb. L. Who the hell was L? Not someone from her work, or he'd have known better than to leave a paper trail. Someone new. Someone reckless. I didn't know him yet, but I would. The best part of pretending to be sick is that people don't expect you to be watching. She thought she could move through the house like I was a ghost. In reality, I'd seen more of her in these past few months than I ever did when I was healthy. I saw the way her eyes stayed glued to her phone a second too long. I saw her swipe notifications away like mosquitoes. I watched her paint on that careful, serene smile every time she checked my pulse, like I was already dead. It wasn't just betrayal. It was arrogance. She thought I was too broken to notice. That's what pissed me off more than anything. Not that she cheated, but that she thought I wouldn't catch her. That she thought she could play Florence Nightingale while sneaking in late-night rendezvous with L. She thought illness had made me weak. What she didn't realize was, it made me dangerous. I opened the medicine cabinet and stared at the bottles she arranged so lovingly. Painkillers I never took. Anti-nausea pills that stayed sealed. I'd never even seen the inside of a treatment center. The diagnosis was real, but exaggerated. I never told her how early they caught it. Never told her remission was already underway. Instead, I let her believe I was clinging to life by a thread. Played the part, even shaved my head early to sell the illusion. Every groan of pain, every slow shuffle to the bathroom, every tremble in my hand. I rehearsed it all. She wanted to feel needed, wanted to look like a martyr. And I gave her exactly what she needed to drop her guard. I spent the next few hours sitting in that same spot on the couch, just watching the door, waiting. When she came home, she kissed my forehead again, asked if I needed soup, ran her fingers through my hair like I was still the same fragile man she left behind. And I smiled. I smiled so hard it almost hurt. She had no idea that she wasn't caring for a dying man. She was feeding a wolf. And the worst part? She'd invited him into her bed. The note was the first break in the dam. But I didn't rush to confront her. No, this kind of betrayal didn't deserve a scream. It deserved an opera. And I was going to compose it one movement at a time. She said she wanted to try pottery. That was the first shift. We were eating takeout on a Wednesday night. Thai, her favorite, green curry with tofu. And she looked up from her plate with this spark in her eyes I hadn't seen in months, maybe years, and said, "I think I need something creative in my life again. Something just for me." I smiled, of course I did. I told her it sounded wonderful, encouraged it even. Hell, I even looked up studios near us and offered to pay for the classes. That's what a supportive husband does, right? She kissed my cheek, told me I was the best thing that ever happened to her. The next week, she was gone 3 nights out of 5, supposedly working with clay. I never asked questions. I trusted her. Or maybe I just didn't want to know. The first real jolt came when I noticed the pottery studio she mentioned didn't exist. I tried to surprise her, thought maybe I'd pick her up after class with flowers. But the address she gave led to a boarded-up strip mall. No signs. No lights. Just empty storefronts and cracked pavement. I never told her I went. I didn't want to see the look on her face when I asked. Then came the music. She started playing these new playlists, slow, moody stuff she never listened to before. Songs about desire, liberation, transformation. I'd hear them faintly when she showered. Once, she forgot to disconnect her phone from the Bluetooth speaker, and when I walked into the kitchen, I caught the end of some breathy monologue from a song that sounded less like music and more like a seduction. She laughed it off, said it was just something the instructor played during pottery. I nodded, said nothing. The silence between us started stretching, growing teeth. But every time I tried to talk to her, really talk, she redirected. Let's not make everything about the cancer, she'd say. Or worse, I just need a little space to breathe right now, to figure out who I am outside of this. And she'd gesture vaguely toward me, like I was an object cluttering her self-discovery. She started locking her phone. Password changed. Notifications silenced. Her Instagram went private. Her gallery had almost nothing in it when I saw it by accident. Just a few food pics and photos of sunsets. Gone were the selfies, the couple shots, the little videos we used to take on weekend drives. I'm decluttering my digital life, she said, when I asked. It's part of this whole growth phase I'm in. Growth. That word became her mantra. Growth. Boundaries. Freedom. She said them like spells, like incantations meant to shield her from responsibility. I wanted to believe it was just a phase, that she'd come back around once the storm passed. But then came the lipstick, deep red, the kind she used to save for special occasions. I found the tube in her coat pocket one morning while hanging it up. She hadn't worn it for me in over a year. I watched her that night, waiting to see if it would make an appearance. It didn't. She left the house in yoga pants and a hoodie, said she was going for a late class, kissed my forehead, and walked out. An hour later, I checked the coat again. The lipstick was gone. Her schedule became erratic. Sometimes she came home buzzing with energy, her eyes shining like she'd just touched the stars. Other times, she slinked in like a thief, eyes low, mumbling about how exhausted she was. I offered foot rubs, hot tea, back massages. She brushed them off, always with the same phrase, "You're so sweet, babe. I just need to be alone with my thoughts." The bed grew colder on her side. The space between us widened with every silent dinner, every unanswered text, every shrug when I asked how her day went. She still smiled, but her smile no longer included me. It was directed elsewhere, at something or someone, just beyond my line of sight. And then there was the receipt. It was buried under the passenger seat of her car. A crumpled white strip of paper from a restaurant we'd never been to, with a timestamp for a night she said she was working late. 2 entrees. 2 drinks. A dessert. One of the meals was steak, and she hadn't eaten red meat in 3 years. When I showed it to her, casually, pretending I'd found it while cleaning her car, she barely blinked. "Oh, I grabbed dinner with a coworker. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to upset you. I know things have been off lately." Off. That was the word she used for the slow dismemberment of our marriage. She said it with such calm, like I was supposed to accept it the way you accept rain on your wedding day. I didn't fight. I just smiled and nodded, because the man who fights is the man who still believes there's something to fight for. And I wasn't sure I did anymore. But I wanted to. I wanted to believe. So I kept pretending. I played the role she wanted me to play. And all the while, behind my silence, the cracks were widening, and I could hear the faint sound of everything we built beginning to break. It was a Sunday morning, gray and silent, the kind where even the birds seemed too tired to sing. She was in the kitchen humming, actually humming, like life was good, like everything in her world was clean and new. I watched her from the hallway, the way she poured her coffee with that annoying little swirl she always did, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear like she was in some low-budget romance film. She was texting while she moved, the phone never more than a few inches from her, the screen angled just out of my view, as always. But this time, she made a mistake. She placed it face up on the counter while turning to grab the almond milk, and the screen lit up. I saw the name. Just a first name. Luca. And beneath it, a preview of the message, "Last night was perfect." Still thinking about how you tasted. Can't wait to do it again. I stood there, back pressed to the cold hallway wall, and everything inside me just stopped. Not like a panic. Not a rush of heat. It was the opposite. Ice in my chest. The kind of stillness that you only feel during a total collapse. She laughed, while stirring her coffee. Read the message. Typed a reply. I saw her bite her lip, that same little smirk she used to give me before bed, and I realized I hadn't seen it in over a year. It hadn't vanished. It had just moved. Reassigned. Given to someone else. She took her phone back into her hand and glanced over her shoulder to make sure I wasn't nearby. I stepped silently back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed like a man trying to remember how he got there. I didn't speak. I didn't scream. I didn't even blink. I just sat, processing, staring at the carpet like it had the answers. That message hadn't just confirmed what I feared. It revealed the scope. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't just texting. It was physical, repetitive, intimate. And she had no guilt, no hesitation. She was living a second life while I, the sickly husband, the dying man, played the background character in her drama. I looked around the room and saw all the props of our life together. Wedding photos, a blanket she'd knit for me during treatment, a handwritten note she left beside my pillow 2 weeks ago that said, "You are my home." I picked it up and held it in my hand for a long time, like maybe it would mean something different now, like maybe I could find a hidden truth between the loops of her handwriting. But all I saw was a lie in cursive. I walked to her side of the closet and opened the drawer I wasn't supposed to touch. Inside, under a stack of scarves, I found the black lingerie she told me she'd grown out of, still clean, still folded, still waiting. I ran my fingers over the lace, trying to remember the last time she'd worn it for me. I couldn't, but I was sure Luca could. That was the moment everything fell into place. The pottery classes, the late nights, the shift in music, her new scent, the lipstick. It was never about growth. It was a rebranding. She was becoming someone else for someone else. She wasn't trying to find herself. She was trying to replace herself and leave me buried in the old version like a tomb. I sat back down on the bed, that ridiculous love note still in my hand, and felt something click inside me. A switch flipping. I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't devastated. I wasn't even surprised. I was activated. She'd made the mistake of letting me see the truth before she was done using me. She'd gotten comfortable. Arrogant. And that arrogance would be her undoing. I looked at the clock. It was 10:17 a.m. She'd just taken her first sip of coffee. She had no idea that her countdown had already started. And I would give her everything she wanted: space, freedom, peace. I would become the perfect husband. Again, I would make her believe I was still holding on, still in love, still sick and weak and grateful. But beneath that mask, I was already planning the moment I'd watch her shatter under the weight of her own betrayal. I didn't need to confront her. Not yet. The time for confrontation had passed. This wasn't about arguments or apologies. This was war. And the first rule of war is simple: let the enemy believe they've already won. She had no idea I'd stopped believing her weeks ago. Every kiss goodnight, every love you she tossed over her shoulder before heading to her fake pottery classes, I memorized them like lines in a bad play. I responded with the same energy, the same smile, the same tone I always had, but underneath I was studying her, like a scientist observing a parasite through glass. I became a ghost in my own home, silent, calculating, unblinking. The first thing I did was reroute our home Wi-Fi to a private server I controlled, nothing complicated, just a quiet filter that captured every website accessed, every app opened while she was home. Turns out, my supposedly creatively inspired wife spent more time on encrypted messaging apps and hotel booking sites than on anything remotely artistic. I didn't confront her. I cataloged the details. Timestamps. Hotel names. Patterns. Then I created a shared calendar for doctor's appointments she never asked about, curious if she'd notice. She didn't. She never checked. Too busy planning her next escapade with Luca. So I set my traps. I asked about her day at the studio while holding a small speck of clay between my fingers. I'd found it outside, planted it in her car to see if she'd pretend it was hers. She didn't even blink. Said she was finally sculpting with her hands again. That lie was so smooth it impressed me. But it also confirmed one thing. She was now lying out of reflex. That made her predictable. And predictability makes people vulnerable. I stopped focusing on her and started watching the shadows around her. I remembered her best friend, Ava, the one she used to tell everything to until a few months ago when she suddenly stopped mentioning her altogether. Odd. So I reached out to Ava casually, under the guise of planning a surprise for my wife's birthday. She was cautious at first, but the guilt started leaking out in her tone. I haven't really talked to her in a while, she said. She's been different, busy, distant. I asked if she knew anyone named Luca. There was a long pause. Too long. Then she changed the subject. That was enough. Ava knew something. I didn't push. Instead, I created a fake contact, using an old burner phone I'd kept from a previous job, and started texting my wife as L. Nothing explicit. Just vague, intimate messages sent late at night. I can still taste you. Thinking about last weekend. Miss you, wild girl. Her reactions were immediate. She'd flush, smile into her phone, sometimes walk out of the room to reply. She thought he was still thinking of her. What she didn't know was that I was watching her face as she read my words. I wasn't just testing her, I was confirming everything. Then came the bank statements. We had a shared account she barely touched since I handled the finances, but her personal card, one I used to deposit extra for her birthday surprises, showed me the rest of the story. Dinners at places we never went. Boutique hotel charges tucked between grocery store runs. Uber rides that started from one street and ended near dim, downtown buildings known for their privacy-friendly architecture. She thought she was clever, booking everything with initials or cash tips. But the pattern was sloppy. Regular. She met him once a week, always Thursdays. So the next Thursday, I told her I had a follow-up scan. She kissed me, wished me luck, said she'd be thinking of me. I drove her to work, like always, then circled back and followed her from a distance, not to the studio, not to the hospital, but to a cafe where a tall, smug-looking man in fitted jeans met her with a hug that lingered too long. I parked far enough not to be seen but close enough to take photos. Not for confrontation. For documentation. Evidence. Insurance. My hand didn't shake. I felt nothing. Not rage. Not sadness. Just precision. Calculation. The next move had to be perfect. I returned home before her, left the blinds open, music playing softly. Pretended I'd spent the day resting. She came in glowing. Said she went for a walk to clear her mind. I nodded, handed her tea, kissed her forehead. She had no idea I'd watched her cheat in real time. She had no idea the man she kissed hello had seen her kiss someone else goodbye only an hour before. Then, I turned to her work life. She claimed she was up for a promotion, had been staying late to impress a supervisor. I called her office from a friend's number, asked to speak to her after 6 p.m. The receptionist sounded confused. She leaves by 4 most days. Hasn't been doing overtime in weeks. Interesting. So I started planting seeds. Left a shirt on the bed that wasn't mine. Bought a brand of cologne I'd never worn and sprayed it on the car seat. She didn't ask. Didn't react. Just folded the shirt, tossed it in the laundry, and smiled. She thought she wasn't the only one lying. That I might be cheating too. And in that, she found relief. Because if we were both dirty, neither of us could cast judgment. She was already rationalizing her betrayal as mutual. Perfect. I let her think that. Let her draw her own false map while I built the real one underneath. Every lie she told became a thread I pulled tighter. Every alibi a crack I marked. I wasn't unraveling. I was unraveling her. Quietly. Completely. And when the time came, I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't cry. I would simply hand her the mirror and watch her finally see the monster she'd become. The gallery was her idea. Some charity event for her company, black tie, white wine, abstract art hanging on sterile white walls like the whole evening had been designed by someone trying to make emotion feel expensive. She looked stunning in a dress I hadn't seen before, black velvet, slit up the thigh, plunging neckline. Not for me, of course. Her eyes barely lingered on me all night. But I smiled, held her hand, played the role of the supportive husband like I'd been doing for months. We were halfway through our second round of champagne when I asked if she could come look at one of the paintings with me, something dark and chaotic that reminded me of the inside of my head. She followed, heels clicking softly on the polished floor, and we stood in front of it together, her arm brushing mine. I took her hand in mine gently and said, "It's funny, I used to think trust was like glass, fragile, but at least you could see through it. But really, it's more like this painting. You never know what's hiding behind the noise until you look closer." She laughed awkwardly, tried to say something about the brushwork, but her words died in her throat when a projector flicked on behind us, casting a sharp rectangle of light on the nearby wall. People turned, wine glasses paused midair, Conversation stopped. And there, displayed with perfect clarity, was a photo of her, half-dressed, straddling a man I'd never met, one hand in his hair, her face buried in his neck, time-stamped, location tagged. Taken from the burner phone I'd planted in their usual room 2 days earlier. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. She turned to me, color draining from her face, and whispered, "What is this?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Another image replaced the first, her laughing in a hallway, fixing her hair, holding a keycard. Then another. Her reflection in a mirror, red lipstick smeared across her mouth, a phone in her hand. The audience was small, maybe 15 people, but enough to matter. Her boss. 2 coworkers. A family friend she hadn't seen in years. She stepped in front of the projection like her body could erase the evidence. "It's not what it looks like," she said, voice trembling. "We were just talking. It was a mistake. I was drunk." The script was so familiar I could have mouthed it with her. She reached for my hand, but I didn't move. I just stared. She dropped her voice, trying to find sympathy. "You've been so distant. You've been sick. I didn't know how to deal with it. I felt alone." And there it was, blame, neatly packaged in sorrow. I still said nothing. The images stopped. The projector faded to black. Everyone else turned away, some out of discomfort, others out of shame. She leaned closer, voice sharper now, trying to regain control. "You had no right to do this. To follow me. To spy on me like I'm some criminal." I finally looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "You're right. You're not a criminal. That would require guilt." Her face twitched. She hated that I was calm. She wanted rage, wanted tears. She wanted to believe she still mattered enough to provoke me. "You can't do this here," she hissed. "This is my job. These are my colleagues. You're humiliating me." I raised an eyebrow. "You humiliated yourself." I just turned on the light. Her posture changed then, no longer righteous, but panicked. She started glancing around, probably calculating who she could salvage, which connections could still be protected. I leaned in close, low enough that only she could hear, and said, "You're going to go back in there. Smile, finish your little gala. And then tomorrow, when the HR email hits, and your reputation starts unraveling thread by thread, I want you to remember one thing. I didn't destroy you. I just handed you the rope." Her breath caught in her throat. The fear had finally reached her eyes. She knew something deeper now, not just that I had found out, but that I had planned this, that I had let her walk blind into the trap with a smile on her face. Her voice was a whisper now. "What do you want from me?" I stepped back, folded my hands behind my back like we were admiring the art again. "Nothing," I said. "Not anymore." She opened her mouth to speak again, but no sound came. The silence between us was no longer hers to break. The tension in the room had settled like fog, heavy and thick, everyone pretending to look at art while stealing glances at the woman who'd just been publicly unmasked. I didn't walk away. Not yet. I stood beside her in that ruined moment, letting her feel the full weight of what she'd lost, not just me, not just her dignity, but the illusion of control. And for the first time in months, she had nothing to say. She showed up at the house the next morning like a storm that had nowhere else to go, hair unbrushed, mascara smudged, heels in her hand like she'd walked halfway across the city on broken glass. I watched her from the kitchen as she slammed the front door behind her, breathing like she'd been running, like she was still running. "You're really going to just stand there after what you did?" She snapped, her voice sharp, furious, trembling with the rage of someone who no longer controlled the narrative. I didn't answer. I set my mug down, turned to face her, waited. She paced, hands flying, gesturing like that would somehow add weight to her words. "You humiliated me. In front of my colleagues, my boss, my friends. You ambushed me like a psychopath." Still I said nothing. She stomped toward me, eyes wild, lips curling into that sneer she used to reserve for waitresses who forgot her sauce on the side. "Don't just stare at me like that. Say something, damn it." I tilted my head slightly and replied, "Now you know what silence feels like." That stopped her. Not for long, but enough. She blinked, caught off guard by how calm I still was. "You think you're some kind of hero?" she hissed. "Some noble victim? You're not. You're a parasite. You smothered me with your fake sickness, your clinginess, your sad little life. I was drowning. And Luca, he made me feel alive again." I nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Good. Then maybe he can keep you alive after this." She lunged closer, jabbing her finger toward my chest. "You're pathetic. You always have been. All you ever did was try to control me. You're boring. Safe. Predictable. A real man would have fought for me instead of hiding behind spy games and cheap tricks. I raised an eyebrow. You cheated because I was predictable? I said, that's a new one. You didn't want a man. You wanted an audience. She looked stunned, like she didn't expect me to hit that close to the bone. Her face contorted, twisted between pride and panic. You don't get to lecture me. You. She choked on the next word, tried to redirect, tried to cry, but her eyes stayed dry. I made one mistake. No. I cut in, voice still quiet, still deadly precise. You made 100 decisions. One mistake is a wrong turn. What you did was a demolition. She stumbled back half a step, as if the words hit harder than a slap. You think you're better than me? She said, the pitch of her voice rising now, bordering on hysterical. You're nobody. You're the man who got cheated on and still begged me to stay. I stepped forward just once, enough to make her feel the difference now. I never begged. I observed. And you kept performing. She threw her heels down, like she needed both hands to keep the emotions from boiling over. You're not even angry. What kind of man doesn't get angry? I smiled. The kind who's already won. That broke her. She turned, slammed her fists against the nearest wall, let out this guttural sound halfway between a scream and a sob. You ruined my life, she finally howled, voice cracking. No, I said, walking past her, brushing her shoulder without even looking. You ruined mine. I just returned the favor. She collapsed onto the couch, hugging herself, rocking slightly like a child in the corner of a timeout. I don't deserve this, she mumbled. You don't know what it was like, living with you, your sadness, your silence. I needed more. I needed something real. I turned around slowly. And instead of talking, UF asterisk 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 at a stranger. That was your solution. She looked up, face red, veins visible in her neck. You don't love me anymore. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. A realization. I didn't deny it. No, I said. I loved the woman you pretended to be. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her eyes darted around the room, like she was searching for a script, a lifeline, anything to bring the power back. So what now? She asked, voice small, scared, stripped of the venom. Now, I echoed, stepping to the door. Now you live with the version of yourself you tried so hard to hide. Everyone else finally sees her. Let me know how that works out. I didn't leave. Not yet. I stood by the door, watching her unravel like a cheap thread, every mask slipping, every performance failing. She curled deeper into the couch, as if shrinking would somehow undo everything. But the truth had already settled in the air between us, thick, final, irreversible. And nothing she said could change the fact that I no longer cared. That was the real punishment. Not the public shame. Not the collapse of her lies. But this moment right here. Me, standing silent, unmoved, untouchable, while she drowned alone in the consequences she carved with her own hands. She thought I would stew, sulk, disappear into my own misery like a good little victim. She had no idea that while she was busy playing the shattered woman, pacing the living room and sending long, guilt-drenched texts to friends about how we were going through a rough patch, I was already weeks ahead. I didn't act like I was leaving. I made it look like I was healing. Quiet, reserved, still here. Still predictable. Meanwhile, I was building the exit plan brick by brick, using every lie she ever told as mortar. The first move was securing the essentials. I started with the finances. She didn't even notice the joint account was restructured, her access downgraded to view only, while I rerouted the main deposits into a separate personal account she never knew existed. The credit cards followed, canceled, reissued under my name alone. The utilities? Quietly transferred. Car lease? In my name. I scheduled the retrieval of the second key through a garage reset, one she never noticed happened. It wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. She was still living in the house, still drinking the same almond milk I bought, still wearing the robe I gave her for our 3rd anniversary, completely unaware she no longer had a financial pulse without my signature. Then came the digital erasure. I copied the entire contents of her phone the day after the gallery event. She was too rattled to password lock anything new. One quick sync, and I had everything. Texts, voicemails, videos, calendar appointments with fake names and real locations. I stored it all on a secure external drive, triple encrypted, with timestamp backups and screen recordings of every scroll. But I didn't stop there. I uploaded select pieces, blurred, anonymized, into a secure cloud folder and shared it only with one contact, her HR manager. No note, no drama, just the facts. A clean folder title, Employee Code of Conduct Violation, Confidential. She'd find out on Monday morning, when she walked into a mandatory meeting with legal and a face she didn't recognize from the executive floor. I didn't make threats. I gave information. Facts. Dates. Patterns. Just enough to trigger internal scrutiny and destroy her veneer of professionalism. She worked so hard to be seen as flawless at work, always talking about her executive future. Now that future had a shadow trailing it. After that, it was time for the social dismantling. I called her father. He was an old-school man, the type who believed in honor, loyalty, reputation. I didn't cry. I didn't rant. I just told him I thought he deserved to know what kind of daughter he raised. Then I emailed him the folder. Photos. Messages. A quiet list of events, locations, and names. I copied her mother, who had adored me like a second son. I knew they'd call her. Knew the shame would come boiling to the surface. Not because of me, but because her facade couldn't survive scrutiny from the people she once used for validation. Friends came next. I didn't beg for sides. I sent one final group message to the people we both knew, short and clean. In case you hear a version of the story that makes me out to be the villain, here's the truth. Link included. Silence followed. Then slow, steady responses. Some apologies. Some fury. Some just left her on read. I filed for divorce 2 days later. Quietly. Through a lawyer who specialized in high-efficiency asset division and evidence-based petitions. I didn't serve her the papers at home. I waited. Waited until she was walking into brunch with a mutual friend she'd lied to about working things out. The server handed her the envelope like a check. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. The message was clear. Inside was a petition for divorce citing infidelity, supported by documentation, screenshots, hotel records, and witness statements gathered from the security footage of one of her frequent spots. Turns out the desk clerk was an old high school friend of mine. Small world. Smaller lies. The last step was reclaiming the piece she'd poisoned. I booked a moving company, scheduled it for a day I knew she'd be out, meeting her therapist, another man I found through her call logs. While she sipped overpriced lattes and spilled faux vulnerability, my team packed every single item I owned. Every piece of furniture that belonged to me. Every ounce of shared space that now meant nothing. I left behind only the things that reminded me of her deception, the robe, the framed photos of vacations she faked affection in, the ceramic bowl she pretended to make in that imaginary pottery class. On the kitchen counter, I left a flash drive labeled, "You'll want to see this before your job calls." And I walked away. No confrontation. No monologue. No final scream. Just a man reclaiming the life she tried to bury under her self-indulgent wreckage. She thought she had time. She thought I was still stuck in that house, stewing in heartbreak. But while she rehearsed her apologies, her breakdowns, her backup plans, I was already writing the last chapter. And by the time she realized what was happening, all she could do was sit in the ashes of a life she burned, and wonder how the fire turned back on her. The room was already full when we arrived, polished suits, clinking glasses, low murmurs bouncing off chandeliers. Her firm was celebrating the merger she'd been bragging about for months. A corporate gala full of back padding and carefully curated smiles. She wore a deep red dress that hugged her too tightly, too confidently, the kind of dress you wear when you're still pretending you're untouchable. Her arm hooked around mine, a little too tight, like she sensed something was off but couldn't name it. I didn't speak. I guided her inside, through the crowd, toward the people who used to call her brilliant, who used to raise glasses in her name. She didn't notice the glances at first, too busy scanning for someone important to impress. But I saw it, the tightening jaws, the forced smiles, the sudden interest in anything that wasn't her. Then her boss approached, wine in one hand, smile in the other, and said her name like it tasted sour. "We'll need to speak tomorrow," he said. No warmth, no pretense. Privately. She blinked, laughed lightly, tried to deflect, of course. Nothing urgent, I hope. But he was already walking away. The first crack. A tremor before the quake. I guided her further into the room. Straight to the table where her two closest work friends sat stone-faced, arms crossed. They didn't get up, didn't smile. One of them, Jess, the one who once called her soul sister, stood, looked her dead in the eye, then turned and walked away without a word. That's when she started to unravel. Her grip on my arm loosened. She tried to make small talk with the remaining woman at the table, some joke about office politics. but her voice cracked halfway through. The woman simply replied, "I saw the photos. I don't think I know you anymore," and turned her back. That was the second crack. She looked at me, panic blooming in her eyes, searching for some sign of control. I just tilted my head slightly, the ghost of a smile pulling at the corner of my mouth, like I was wondering what line she'd try next. She excused herself, headed toward the bar with too much speed, and that's where she ran into Ava, her oldest friend, her closest confidant, the one she'd once sworn would be her maid of honor no matter what. Ava didn't even give her a chance to speak. "You used me to cover your tracks," she said flatly. "And you dragged me into your lies. We're done." She held out a manila envelope, my doing, of course. Inside were screenshots of conversations where my wife had begged Ava to cover for her, to say she was with her during nights spent in hotel rooms under fake names. Ava didn't shout. She didn't even stay. She handed over the evidence, then walked out, heels clicking like a countdown to something final. My wife stood there, clutching the envelope like it was bleeding. She looked around, eyes darting, chest rising and falling in short, shallow bursts. She turned to me then, trying to smile through it all, but her lips twitched, refused to hold the shape. "Is this you?" she asked, barely audible. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The projector across the room, same model used at the gallery, lit up with a single line, "Integrity begins at home." Beneath it, a flicker of images. Silent, uncaptioned, but unmistakable. Her, in an elevator. Her, pressed against a hallway wall. Her, laughing with a man not me, his hand on her waist. There was no sound, just the buzz of whispers, gasps, chairs shifting uncomfortably. The firm's CEO looked away. Her assistant dropped his glass. The final image lingered, her reflection in a mirror, eyes wild, lipstick smudged, a timestamp and location floating in the corner. She took one step back, then another, her heels catching on the hem of her dress. She turned to me again, tears welling now, voice small. "You stayed. After everything, you're still here." I looked at her, looked through her. "I wanted you to see what it looks like when the truth catches up." She shook her head, laughed bitterly, wiping at her eyes like she could erase the moment. "They don't know what you did. You manipulated this. You're just as guilty." "But I didn't lie," I said. "I didn't cheat. I didn't bury my guilt in someone else's bed." That shut her up. Her mouth hung open for a second before she spun around, as if fleeing the room would undo the damage. But every face turned as she moved. Every glance stuck like a thorn. Her career was bleeding out in real time, her reputation unraveling thread by thread. She reached the exit and paused, shoulders rising like she might make one last stand, but then she turned and saw me still standing there. Calm, collected, watching. And that was what shattered her. Not the photos, not the rejection, but the fact that I didn't flinch, didn't chase, didn't save her. Just watched her world burn with the same quiet detachment she once used to tear mine apart. And in that final moment, she understood the full weight of justice, not loud, not violent, but surgical, patient, and undeniable. It happened at her parents' anniversary dinner, one of those overpriced, over-decorated events where everyone puts on fake smiles and acts like their family has never known a single day of dysfunction. I wasn't going to go, but when her mother personally called and said, "It would mean a lot to have you there," I knew it was time. The room was full, relatives, family, friends, co-workers from both sides, the kind of crowd that made her feel important. She walked in late, arm-linked with Luca, trying to hide him in plain sight like he was a guest, not a bomb. Her parents saw it first, her father's jaw clenched, her mother's wine glass froze mid-sip. The moment was silent, tight, stretched like glass ready to snap. Then I stood up from my seat at the center table and said, loud enough for every conversation to pause, "Are you really bringing him here? To this dinner? You thought this was the moment to flaunt the man you used to destroy your own marriage." Her smile twitched, tried to recover, failed. "He's not what you think," she started, but her father cut her off. "We saw the videos. We know exactly what he is." The crowd gasped, heads turned. Luca looked like he wanted to vanish. He mumbled something about getting air and backed out of the room so fast he almost knocked over a server. She spun around, yelling after him, "Don't you dare walk away from me now," but he was already gone. When she turned back, her face was flushed, not from shame, yet, but from panic. "You set this up," she hissed at me. "You wanted this spectacle." "No," I said calmly. "You wrote this scene when you chose to screw around and lie about it for months. I'm just letting everyone watch the final act." Her voice rose, shrill, cracking at the edges. "You're obsessed. You stalked me. You spied on me. like a sick little control freak who couldn't accept that I was unhappy. Her mother flinched, her father stood. Enough, he said sharply, but she kept going, unraveling with every word. You never saw me. You were always so busy being the perfect husband, like that made up for how boring you were. I wanted fire, passion, something real, not some limp, quiet man who hides behind spreadsheets and passive-aggressive comments. I stepped forward, not fast, just enough to let her know I wasn't retreating. You wanted fire? You wanted passion? I said, voice rising now. Then why didn't you ask for it? Why didn't you speak like an adult instead of cheating like a coward? You had 1,000 chances to tell me you weren't happy. But you didn't. You waited until I was vulnerable, until you could lie straight to my face while pretending to be loyal. You didn't want a partner, you wanted an audience for your fantasy life, and when I stopped clapping, you rewrote the script behind my back. People were whispering now. Phones discreetly raised. Someone in the back had started recording. Her hands shook, her eyes darted to the crowd. This isn't fair. You're turning everyone against me. You did that yourself, I said, voice sharp enough to silence the room. You didn't just cheat on me. You lied to your friends, your family, your job. You dragged your parents into this. You humiliated mine, and now you're angry that I won't let you keep pretending to be the victim. She stepped closer, tears finally breaking. I made a mistake, okay? I was lonely. I didn't feel wanted. I didn't know how to ask for what I needed. But you knew how to sneak around, I said coldly. You knew how to plan hotel stays, delete messages, lie to every single person who trusted you. You knew how to play the role of the grieving, supportive wife while setting fire to the life we built. Don't you dare stand here and call it a mistake. A mistake is a moment. What you did was a campaign. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing now, hair falling into her face as the weight of her actions finally crushed what was left of her poise. Her mother whispered something to her father, who shook his head and sat down hard, rubbing his temples. A cousin stood and walked out. One of her coworkers muttered, "Unbelievable," and followed. She looked up at me then, shattered, mascara streaked, makeup running, her voice small and broken. So what now? You just leave me like this? I stared at her, the room still buzzing with murmurs and silent judgment around us. No, I said. I already left. You just didn't notice until everyone else did too. And then I turned, walked through the crowd without looking back, her sobs echoing behind me, her reputation bleeding out in the silence that followed, and the door closed behind me with a finality that needed no applause. She lasted 3 weeks at her job after the fallout, maybe 4. HR never gave her an official reason for the dismissal, but she knew. Everyone did. The whispered glances in the hallway, the meetings she was suddenly excluded from, the abrupt cancellation of the project she once bragged about leading, all signs of a verdict that had already been passed long before the paperwork was processed. Luca never resurfaced. He blocked her number, vanished from social media, ghosted so hard she might as well have imagined him. Turned out, he was just another illusion she clung to, a fantasy that only existed as long as the spotlight was off. Once it hit them, he bolted like a cockroach when the lights come on. Her best friends posted supportive messages the first day the story spread, the kind that sound nice but say nothing. By the end of the week, their comments stopped. By the end of the month, their profiles were locked to her. And soon after, her name was removed from every group chat she'd once dominated like a queen holding court. Her parents didn't disown her publicly, they didn't need to. The silence said enough. Her father, who once called me the son I never had, stopped answering her calls. Her mother sent one short message. What you did to him was beyond cruel. We can't defend you. The rest of the family followed suit. The cousins she used to gossip with now crossed the street when they saw her at the store. And yes, she still went to the store, though never during daylight anymore. Never in heels. Always in baggy clothes and a cap pulled low, like anonymity might shield her from the judgment she couldn't bear. She sold the house, my house, at a loss and moved 2 towns over, into a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat that reeked of detergent and despair. Got a job answering phones at a temp agency. No office. No title. Just a headset and a spreadsheet of numbers to call. No one there knew her past. No one cared. That was the point. But the most pathetic moment came one rainy Thursday afternoon, 6 months to the day since the confrontation. She showed up at my door. No warning. No text. Just her, standing there on the porch like a stray cat who forgot where home was. Her makeup was gone, hair frayed from the rain, her coat soaked, and her eyes, those once sharp, calculating eyes, were dull, hollow, ruined. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, shivering, hoping maybe I'd say something to break the silence. I didn't. I waited. She finally exhaled and said, "I still love you." I never stopped. I was stupid. I was scared. "Please, please, just give me 5 minutes. I need to explain." I tilted my head. Not with anger. Not with pity. Just observation. Like you might look at a person you used to know who'd been completely rearranged into something unfamiliar. "Explain," I said finally. "You explained plenty while I was dying in front of you, and you were sneaking into hotel rooms. You explained a lot when you told people I smothered you. You explained everything when you begged your friends to lie for you." She stepped forward, voice cracking. "I miss us. I miss you. I don't care what people think. I just want to fix it." I nodded, slowly. "You can't fix a house after you burn the foundation." Her eyes filled with tears. "So that's it." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The door was still between us, and so was everything she destroyed. She started crying harder, sobbing into her hands, the way she used to cry when she lost control. But this time, there was no manipulation left, no game, no plan. Just raw, pathetic ruin. I let her cry, let her feel the depth of the silence she'd earned. And when she finally looked up, searching for any flicker of warmth in my eyes, I gave her the last thing I would ever say. "You're just a story I used to tell myself about loyalty." Then I closed the door, and I never opened it again. Thank you for listening to my story. Where are you from? And tell me, did you enjoy it?